Circumference and All the King's Tens, a math adventure, written by Cindy Nushwander, illustrated by Wayne Guian, and read by Mr. Alicea. The last time we saw the king, he seemed a bit gloomy, said Lady Di of Ameter to her husband Circumference one evening. His birthday is soon. Let's give him a surprise party here at our castle to cheer him up. We could invite people from the entire countryside. That's a fine idea, answered Circumference. We'll plan a huge celebration for him. Lady Di sent out invitations. Servants rushed about the castle, cleaning and cooking. Carpenters built long wooden tables while seamstresses sewed tents. Guests began arriving in groups. Each day, more kept coming. Lady Di showed the guests where to stay. Rooms filled up quickly. The castle is already exploding with guests, and an even bigger group is arriving this afternoon, she told Circumference one morning. King Arthur's party is tonight, and I'm not ready. What a royal mess. Circumference nodded. I'll gather everyone in the meadow to get them out of your way. Soon, a large crowd stood in the grassy field outside the castle walls. The king will arrive in a few hours, began Circumference. Let's practice a royal march of greeting. Would everyone step smartly toward the center of the meadow? Pandemonium broke out. Knees marching high knocked into arms swinging wide. The knights of the round table crashed into each other, falling into metallic heaps. Lady Di appeared in the middle of this confusion. I need to know how many guests will be here for lunch, and then how many for dinner, she called to her husband over the clatter. Circumference waved his arms. Attention, he bellowed. We need to know how many of you are here. But everyone kept milling around. Counting the crowd seemed like an impossible job. Sir Kel stepped forward with a suggestion. Forming small circles of people might work, he said. Each group could count its members and call out how many. Lady Di could then add up the numbers. Let's try it, said Circumference, shepherding guests into groups. 61, 111, 58, 17, 46, cried out voices in the crowd. No good, said Lady Di, stopping them. My head's spinning just trying to keep track of all of those numbers. We could march by in one straight line, said Sir Lionel Segment, counting up from 1 as we pass. So the group formed a queue. They began moving forward, past Lady Di. The line was so long it disappeared over the hill. Too slow, noted Lady Di. The king's birthday will have come and gone long before I finish figuring this out. And I'm getting rather hot standing here, complained Sir Tangent inside his armor. Others agreed. Let's set up some tents, said Circumference. We can get into the shade while we think of another way to count everyone. On the edge of the meadow, the castle workers erected a small tent. Immediately, knights, ladies, and villagers rushed inside. It bulged dangerously. That tent is just too tiny, huffed Sir Tangent as he walked out. It doesn't even hold 10 people. He threw up his hands in impatience. Maybe this party for the king was a bad idea, Lady Di said to Circumference. Tempers are beginning to flare, and I still don't know how many meals to serve. We need a new idea, said Circumference. Then he paused and smiled. Or maybe we can use parts of everyone's ideas. I think I have the solution. He stepped into the middle of the meadow. Attention, everyone! Please gather into small groups, as Sir Kel suggested. Spread those groups out into lines as Sir Lionel Segment described. Each line should have 10 people, like the 10 fingers on Sir Tangent's hands. The crowd grouped themselves as Circumference directed. Lady Di started to count, but there were still so many rows. If we'd put 10 rows together, they would equal 100, she said. That would make this counting go even more quickly. The hot but patient guests moved into the larger formations. I'm counting 9 groups of 100, said Lady Di. There are also 8 rows of 10 and 1 row with only 7. That's 900 plus 80 plus 7. Now at least I know how many lunches we need. Then 25 more people arrived from the small town of Lower Numberton. Welcome, said Lady Di, smiling. Could you get together in rows of 10, and could 3 of you join that line of 7 to make another row of 10? 2 new groups of 10 joined the other 8 rows of 10 and made a new group of 100. 1 more row of 10 remained, with the lone farmer and his wife standing shyly just beside it. Oh my! Now we're up to 1,012 guests, murmured Lady Di. Several more tents of different sizes were set up to provide shade for everyone. To the left of the tiny tent that fit 9 people or fewer, the castle workers pitched a bigger tent. It could hold up to 9 rows of 10 or 90. Next to that tent, there was an even bigger one for as many as 9 groups of 100. An enormous tent was next, for crowds of up to 9,000. We'll serve lunch in the largest tent, declared Lady Di. As everyone was finishing the last luncheon bites, a cloud of dust appeared in the distance. More guests were coming. It was a huge group from the King's City Camelot. Greetings, Circumference, called the leader of the caravan. We're here for the party. The king and his nobles should arrive shortly. Well then, said Circumference, rubbing his hands together briskly, let's find a place for all of you. It took a while, but the Camelot guests were finally organized. They had 8 groups of 1,000, 9 groups of 100, 8 groups of 10, and 7 singles. Lady Di sent a messenger back to the castle to add 8,987 to the 1,012 guests who were already there for the evening feast. We'll need to put up another huge tent for dinner, said Circumference. Yes, agreed Lady Di, and we could really surprise the king if everyone stayed hidden until his arrival. So they assigned each guest to a tent. The meadow became a nightly number neighborhood. There were 9 folks in the first tent. There were 90 in the second tent next door. There were 900 in the third tent, and 9,000 in the fourth tent. The fifth tent was empty except for longwood and tables and benches. Lady Di passed out silk scarves to each person, saying, "The color of your scarf matches your tent flag." Then the entire group gathered to practice their surprise greeting for the king. They had rehearsed only once when a trumpet blared in the distance. Bop, ba ba ba. "The king is arriving," yelled Circumference. "Hurry into your tents and wait for my signal." When the king arrived, he had a sour look on his face. "It's my birthday," he muttered grumpily, "and I've been stuck on the back of a horse 4 hours. What are all these tents for? I'm in no mood for a jousting tournament." Circumference and Lady Di welcomed the king. "Your Majesty," said Lady Di, showing him to his seat of honor. "A birthday greeting for you," said Circumference, bowing and clapping his hands. This was the signal the hidden guests were waiting for. They streamed out of their tents, singing and dancing. The king was surprised. His sour look began to turn into a smile. At the end of their performance, everyone lifted and lowered their scarves one row after another, starting with the largest group of 9,000, then the 900, then the 90, and finally the 9. It looked as if a shimmering ocean wave had crashed at the feet of the king. He stood and applauded. "Well done! Thank you, my friends!" Lady Di clapped her hands. "And now let's eat." After a tasty dinner, the cooks brought out an enormous birthday cake and other delicious sweets. The guests cheered as the king blew out the candles. Then everyone heard the thunder of hoofbeats. "Uh-oh," said Circumference. "Another group approaches. Their flag shows them to be from the city of Addingmore. How many more tents will we need?" he wondered out loud. "And how many more desserts will that be?" asked Lady Di. "I hope we have enough cake." The concept of place value, or where numbers live, allows us to make any number using the digits 0 through 9. A digit's place tells its value, or how much it's worth. In the story, 9,999 guests show up for King Arthur's party. The number tells us there are 9 groups of 1,000, 9 groups of 100, 9 groups of 10, and 9 single guests. The guests fill the tents in a nightly number neighborhood. The next time you see a big number, try imagining that the digits live in a number neighborhood. Each digit's place, or tent, is 10 times bigger than the one to its right.